The dust-laden wind carried a premonition of change as Isabella Vaughn rode into Guthrie, Oklahoma Territory, in the sweltering summer of 1889. Her fingers, calloused from months of hard travel, gripped the reins tightly as her horse picked its way down the bustling main street. The newly established town, born of the land run just months before, buzzed with the chaotic energy of a place still defining itself. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs, not from fear but from desperate hope. Somewhere in this hodgepodge of hastily built structures and determined settlers, she prayed she'd find the one thing she needed most: someone who would understand her sister. Isabella dismounted outside the general store, her boots hitting the dirt with a soft thud. She tied her chestnut mare to the hitching post and straightened her travel-worn dress, suddenly conscious of her appearance after weeks on the trail. Her younger sister, Lily Harris, remained seated on her own horse, her wide hazel eyes surveying the unfamiliar surroundings with visible apprehension. "We're here, Lily," Isabella said, signing the words as she spoke them. Her hands moved with practiced fluency, having communicated with her deaf sister this way since childhood. Lily nodded, her expressive face showing both relief and uncertainty as she slid gracefully from the saddle. At 22, she was 2 years Isabella's junior, but possessed a resilience that sometimes made her seem the elder of the two. The sisters had journeyed from their failed homestead in Kansas after the death of their parents, seeking a new beginning in the promising frontier town. The general store's door swung open, the bell above it jingling cheerfully as a tall man stepped onto the boardwalk. He paused, adjusting his hat against the bright sunlight before his gaze fell upon the two women. Isabella noted his imposing stature, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that strained against his simple cotton shirt. His face, partially shadowed by his Stetson, revealed a strong jawline covered with several days' worth of stubble. "Ladies," he greeted with a nod, his voice carrying the rough cadence of the frontier with a hint of something softer beneath. Isabella nodded politely in return, but her attention was already diverted to helping Lily gather their modest belongings. They needed information, directions to the boarding house they'd heard might take in respectable women, perhaps news of work opportunities. The man lingered, seeming to sense their predicament. "New to town?" he asked. "Yes," Isabella replied, turning back to him. "We've just arrived from Kansas." "I'm Isabella Vaughn, and this is my sister, Lily Harris." "Ian Vance," he offered in return, touching the brim of his hat. "Sheriff of this fine establishment, such as it is." His eyes, a startling blue against his sun-weathered skin, studied them with interest rather than suspicion. Isabella felt a flutter of relief. A sheriff was precisely the sort of person who could point them in the right direction. "Sheriff Vance, we're looking for Mrs. Daniels' boarding house. Do you know where we might find it?" Before he could answer, Lily stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the sheriff's face. She raised her hands, forming signs quickly, then realized the futility of her instinctive communication. Frustration crossed her features as she fumbled in her skirt pocket for the small slate and chalk she carried. Sheriff Vance's expression shifted to one of curiosity. He watched as Lily scribbled hastily on her slate, then held it toward him. "I'm deaf. Can you write it down?" she had written, her normally neat handwriting made jagged by urgency. Isabella prepared herself for the usual reactions: discomfort, awkward pity, or worse, dismissal. She'd seen them all during their journey west, had fielded countless intrusive questions about her poor afflicted sister. But Sheriff Vance surprised her. His face revealed no discomfort, only thoughtful consideration as he read the slate. Then, to Isabella's astonishment, his hands moved in a halting, unpracticed gesture. He pointed to himself, then touched his ear and made a cutting motion. "You know sign language." Isabella couldn't keep the shock from her voice. The sheriff's weather-lined face broke into a rueful smile. "No, madam, just picked up a few gestures from a deaf miner back in Colorado." His eyes remained on Lily, addressing her directly even though she couldn't hear him. "But I can learn proper." Lily watched his hands and face intently, then glanced at Isabella with raised eyebrows, silently asking for translation. Isabella signed the sheriff's words, explaining his limited knowledge but willingness to learn. Lily's face brightened visibly, a smile transforming her features. "Mrs. Daniel's boarding house is 3 streets over," Sheriff Vance continued, now speaking to both women while pointing east. "White building with blue shutters. Can't miss it. She's a good woman, fair with her rates. Tell her I sent you." "Thank you, Sheriff," Isabella replied, genuinely grateful for his kindness. He hesitated, then added, "Town's growing fast. Lots of opportunities for those willing to work." "What skills do you ladies bring?" Isabella straightened, pride evident in her posture. "I'm a skilled seamstress, and Lily is exceptionally talented with embroidery and fine needlework. We were hoping to establish ourselves in that line." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "Mrs. Peterson at the dress shop might be looking for help. And there's talk of a proper hotel being built. They'll need linens, curtains, all manner of sewn goods." Hope bloomed in Isabella's chest. Perhaps Guthrie would indeed offer the fresh start they desperately needed. As they prepared to depart, Sheriff Vance added, "Sunday services at the church include dinner afterward. Good way to meet folks." His eyes shifted to Lily again. "And I meant what I said about learning proper, if you're willing to teach, that is." Isabella translated his words to Lily, whose response was an enthusiastic nod and a smile that seemed to light up the dusty street. "We'd be honored, Sheriff," Isabella answered for them both, finding herself returning his smile. "Perhaps after we've settled in." "I'll look forward to it," he replied, touching his hat brim again before turning toward the jailhouse. As they led their horses toward the boarding house, Isabella couldn't help glancing back at the tall figure of the sheriff. There was something unusual about him, not just his willingness to learn sign language, but a quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. "What do you think?" she signed to Lily as they walked. Lily's hands moved quickly in response. "I like him. His eyes are kind. And did you see how he looked at me, not at you when I showed my slate? Most people talk to you about me as if I'm not there." Isabella nodded, having noticed the same thing. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to secure lodgings and find work first." Lily's impish grin made Isabella laugh despite her practical concerns. "You can't deny he's handsome," Lily signed. "I didn't notice," Isabella lied, earning her a disbelieving look from her sister. Mrs. Daniels proved to be exactly as Sheriff Vance had described: fair, practical, and mercifully unconcerned about Lily's deafness. She showed them to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor, explaining her rules in a brisk manner while Isabella translated for Lily. "Breakfast at 6, supper at 6. You're responsible for your own midday meal. No gentlemen callers in the rooms. Weekly rate includes laundry once a week." The older woman hesitated, then added more gently, "Town's full of newcomers. Most folks here are starting fresh. Nobody much cares about what came before or what burdens you carry." That night, as they lay in their narrow beds, exhausted from travel but too wired to sleep, Isabella found herself thinking of Sheriff Vance's unexpected gesture. Such a small thing, really, those few improvised signs, but it had ignited a spark of hope that perhaps here, in this raw, unformed town, Lily might finally be seen for who she truly was. Not a burden, not an affliction, but a capable, intelligent woman with dreams of her own. "Sleep well, sister," she signed in the dim light. Lily's hands moved in the darkness. "I have a good feeling about this place." Isabella didn't respond, not wanting to either encourage or dampen her sister's optimism. But as she drifted toward sleep, the image of the sheriff's thoughtful blue eyes stayed with her, and she found herself hoping, against her better judgment, that Lily's intuition might prove correct. The following morning dawned bright and promising. Isabella and Lily rose early, dressed in their best though travel-worn dresses, and set out to call on Mrs. Peterson at the dress shop. The town looked different in the clear light of morning, more substantial somehow, with people hurrying about their business and the sounds of construction echoing from several directions. The dress shop occupied a corner building on the main street, its large windows displaying a modest collection of ready-made garments and bolts of fabric. A bell tinkled as they entered, and a thin, sharp-featured woman looked up from her work at a cutting table. "Good morning," Isabella greeted her. "Are you Mrs. Peterson?" The woman nodded, setting aside her scissors. "I am. How may I help you ladies?" "I'm Isabella Vaughn, and this is my sister, Lily Harris. We're seamstresses recently arrived from Kansas." "Sheriff Vance mentioned you might be looking for help." Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows rose at the mention of the sheriff. "Did he now?" She studied the sisters with renewed interest. "Your sister doesn't speak." Isabella had learned it was best to be direct about Lily's condition. "My sister is deaf, but she reads lips quite well and we communicate through sign language. More importantly, her needlework is exceptional." To demonstrate, Lily opened the small portfolio she carried, displaying samples of her intricate embroidery, delicate flowers, birds, and decorative patterns that had earned admiration even back east. Mrs. Peterson's professional interest was immediately piqued. She examined the samples closely, her thin fingers tracing the precise stitches. "This is very fine work," she admitted. "And you say she can't hear at all?" "No, but it doesn't affect her abilities," Isabella replied firmly, signing the conversation for Lily's benefit. "I suppose not, Mrs." Peterson murmured, still studying the embroidery. She glanced up at Lily. "Can you follow a pattern? Work to specifications?" Lily nodded confidently, signing her response, which Isabella translated. "I can follow any design and adapt it as needed. I also create original patterns." The shop owner seemed to come to a decision. "I'm overwhelmed with orders. The town's growing faster than I can keep up, and most women here are too busy establishing homesteads to worry about fancy stitchery." She named a weekly wage that, while not generous, was fair. "You'll work here in the shop so customers can see the quality they're getting. Can you start tomorrow?" Relief flooded through Isabella. "Yes, certainly. Both of us." Mrs. Peterson hesitated. "I need one fine needleworker for embellishments and one everyday seamstress for basic construction." "If you're both skilled as you claim, we have an arrangement." They left the dress shop with employment secured, their spirits lifted by this first success. As they walked back toward the boarding house, planning to unpack their sewing supplies and prepare for their new positions, Isabella caught sight of Sheriff Vance emerging from the barber shop. He'd clearly just had a shave, his strong jawline now smooth, his dark hair trimmed neatly beneath his hat. He spotted them at the same moment and crossed the street to greet them. "Morning, ladies. Getting acquainted with our fair town." Isabella nodded, noticing how he positioned himself so Lily could see his face clearly. "We've just secured positions with Mrs. Peterson." "Thank you for the recommendation." "Glad to hear it," he replied, genuine pleasure in his voice. Then, to Isabella's surprise, he raised his hands in a careful, deliberate gesture. He pointed to Lily, then touched his lips and moved his flattened hand outward in a clear attempt to sign, "How are you?" Isabella blinked in astonishment. The sign was correct, if somewhat stiff. Beside her, Lily's face lit up with delight. She signed back, her hands moving gracefully. "I am well, thank you. Did you learn that just now?" The sheriff looked to Isabella for translation. When she conveyed Lily's question, he shook his head. "Borrowed a book from the schoolteacher this morning. Figured I ought to start learning right away if I'm to be any use to all citizens of this town." The implication that he considered Lily a citizen deserving of his service rather than a burden to be managed touched Isabella deeply. She translated his words, watching her sister's face soften with appreciation. "If you're serious about learning," Isabella found herself saying, "perhaps you could join us for dinner one evening this week. We could begin your lessons properly." The invitation slipped out before she could consider its propriety, and she immediately worried it might seem forward. But Sheriff Vance's smile dispelled her concern. "I'd be honored," he replied. "Though I should warn you, I've been told I'm a stubborn student." "Fortunately, we're patient teachers," Isabella returned, surprised by the easy banter between them. They arranged for him to join them at the boarding house dining room the following evening, with Mrs. Daniels' permission. As they parted ways, Isabella noted the way the sheriff's gaze lingered on them both, his expression thoughtful. "He's learning for me," Lily signed excitedly once he was out of sight. "No one has ever done that before except family." Isabella nodded, trying to temper her sister's enthusiasm. "It's certainly kind of him, but remember his position requires him to communicate with everyone in town." Lily shot her a knowing look. "You like him." "I barely know him," Isabella protested. "But you like what you see," Lily persisted, her hands moving teasingly. Isabella couldn't deny the flutter of interest she felt toward the tall sheriff, but years of protecting herself and Lily had taught her caution. "He seems like a good man," she conceded, "but our focus needs to be establishing ourselves here. Romance is a luxury we can't afford right now." Lily's expression turned serious. "We came here for a new beginning, Isabella. That means new possibilities for both of us. Don't shut yourself away on my account." Isabella squeezed her sister's hand in response, touched by her concern but unwilling to acknowledge the truth in her words. For years, Lily's needs had defined Isabella's choices. The idea of pursuing her own desires seemed almost foreign now, a distant dream from her youth, before responsibility had reshaped her life. As they continued toward the boarding house, Isabella pushed aside thoughts of the sheriff's kind blue eyes and focused instead on the practical matters at hand. They had work, shelter, and a promising new community. That would have to be enough for now. Yet deep in her heart, a spark had been ignited, a dangerous, warming spark of possibility she hadn't felt in a very long time. The following day passed in a blur of activity as the sisters settled into their new positions at the dress shop. Mrs. Peterson proved to be a demanding but fair employer, and by day's end, both Isabella and Lily had proven their worth through steady, skilled work. The customers, mostly wives of merchants and professionals establishing themselves in the growing town, had reacted to Lily's deftness with varying degrees of curiosity and awkwardness, but her beautiful needlework spoke for itself. As closing time approached, Isabella found herself increasingly distracted by thoughts of the evening ahead. Sheriff Vance would join them for dinner at 6:30, just an hour from now. She tried to tell herself it was merely anticipation of beginning the sign language lessons, but she couldn't deny the extra care she took in smoothing her hair and straightening her collar before they left the shop. They arrived back at the boarding house with just enough time to freshen up before dinner. Mrs. Daniels had seemed pleasantly surprised when they'd asked permission for the sheriff to join them. Commenting that it was about time Ian Vance took a proper meal with civilized company instead of eating at that drafty saloon. As they entered the dining room, Isabella immediately spotted Sheriff Vance, or Ian, as she supposed she should think of him in this social setting, seated at a small table near the window. He'd cleaned up considerably, wearing a pressed shirt with no vest or gun belt, though she suspected his revolver was still within reach, perhaps in his boot. He rose as they approached, his height even more apparent without the bulk of his usual outdoor gear. "Ladies," he greeted them, pulling out chairs for both sisters. "You're looking well after your first day of employment." Isabella translated for Lily, whose quick hands responded with thanks and a question about his day. "Blessedly quiet," Ian replied after Isabella interpreted. "Just a minor dispute over a property line and one cowboy who needed to sleep off his enthusiasm in my jail cell." As they settled in for the meal, Isabella observed how Ian focused intently whenever Lily signed, his eyes tracking her movements as if trying to commit them to memory. When the food was served, a hearty stew with fresh bread, he waited until Isabella had translated the server's comments before beginning to eat, ensuring Lily wasn't left out of any interaction. "I've been practicing what little I know," Ian admitted after they'd eaten, producing a small, well-worn book from his pocket. "Manual Alphabet and Language of Signs, 1875 edition. Miss Winters, our school teacher, had it in her library." Isabella examined the book with interest. "This is quite comprehensive for a beginner. Where would you like to start? Basics, I suppose. Everyday phrases that might be useful. I'd like to at least be able to greet Miss Harris properly when I see her around town." They spent the next hour with Isabella, and Lily teaching Ian simple signs: hello, goodbye, thank you, please, how are you, and watching as he practiced, his large hands surprisingly deft despite their roughness. He struggled occasionally with the more intricate finger positions, but his determination never wavered. "Your hands aren't used to such delicate movements," Isabella observed as he frowned over a particularly challenging sign. "They're better suited to breaking up saloon fights, I suppose," he agreed with a self-deprecating smile. "But they'll learn." Lily signed something too quick for Isabella to catch, her expression mischievous. "What did she say?" Ian asked. Isabella felt heat rise to her cheeks. "She said your hands look strong enough to learn anything they set their mind to." Ian's eyes crinkled with amusement as he looked at Lily. "Your sister is kind to say so." He attempted the sign for thank you, performing it correctly this time. Lily beamed, then signed slowly and deliberately so he could follow some of the movements. "Why are you learning signs?" Isabella hesitated, then translated faithfully. Ian considered the question seriously. "When I took this job, I swore to serve everyone in this town, not just those who are easiest to communicate with." He paused, then added more quietly, "And I know what it's like to feel isolated, even in a crowd of people." The simple honesty in his answer touched Isabella deeply. She had encountered so many who viewed Lily's deafness as a tragedy or an inconvenience, but never someone who recognized the fundamental human need for connection that transcended physical limitations. As the evening drew to a close, Ian thanked them for the lesson and asked if they might continue the following week. "Same time, if you're not tired of my slow progress, that is." "We'd be delighted," Isabella replied, finding she truly meant it. Outside the boarding house, as they prepared to part ways, Ian surprised them by signing good night to Lily, then turned to Isabella. "Miss Vaughn, might I have a word with you privately?" Curious, Isabella nodded to Lily, who smiled knowingly before heading inside. Alone with the sheriff on the lamplit porch, Isabella felt suddenly self-conscious. "Is something wrong, Sheriff Vance?" "Ian, please," he corrected gently. "And no, nothing's wrong, He hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "I wanted to ask about your sister. How did she come to be deaf? Was she born that way?" The question was personal but asked with such genuine concern that Isabella found herself answering honestly. "Scarlet fever when she was 4. I was 6. We both fell ill, but I recovered fully while Lily lost her hearing." Ian nodded slowly. "That must have been difficult for your family. Our parents were remarkable people. Father learned sign language alongside Lily, and Mother insisted she receive education beyond what most thought possible for a deaf child. They never treated her as less capable." "They sound like extraordinary folks." "They were," Isabella agreed, a familiar ache of loss tightening her throat. "They died last winter influenza. The Kansas homestead couldn't sustain a sisters alone, so we came here for a fresh start." Ian's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss, and I admire your courage in making such a journey." "Thank you," Isabella replied, surprised by how easy it was to talk with him. "But I've monopolized enough of your evening with our personal history." "Not at all," he assured her. "I asked after all, and I appreciate you sharing it with me." He hesitated, then added, "I hope you know that not everyone will react to your sister's condition with understanding. This is a frontier town, still rough around the edges." Isabella straightened. "We're well aware of the challenges, Sheriff. We've faced them our entire lives." "I have no doubt of your capability, Miss Vaughn," he replied with a slight smile. "I just want you to know that should any problems arise, my door is always open to you both." The sincere offer of alliance warmed Isabella more than she cared to admit. "Thank you. That means a great deal." As she watched his tall figure stride away down the darkening street, Isabella felt an unfamiliar flutter in her chest, a dangerous, distracting sensation she hadn't experienced in years. Pushing it firmly aside, she went inside to find Lily waiting with eager eyes and quickly moving hands. "He likes you," her sister signed immediately. "He's simply being kind," Isabella countered. Lily's expressive face showed clear disbelief. "I may be deaf, but I'm not blind. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching, he's interested." Isabella shook her head, unwilling to acknowledge the possibility. "He's the sheriff. It's his job to look out for newcomers." "If you say so," Lily signed with exaggerated doubt. "But I think our sign language lessons will continue long after he's learned all the signs he needs." Isabella chose not to respond, but as she prepared for bed that night, she found her thoughts returning to Ian's thoughtful blue eyes and the gentle way his rough hands had shaped the signs they taught him. It was dangerous to allow such feelings. Her responsibility was to Lily, to establishing their security in this new place. Romance was a complication they couldn't afford. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, Isabella couldn't help wondering what it might be like to be looked at with more than kindness by a man like Ian Vance, to be seen not just as a sister, a caretaker, a seamstress, but as a woman with desires and dreams of her own. The next few weeks established a rhythm to their lives in Guthrie. Work at the dress shop kept them busy during the day, with Lily's exquisite embroidery quickly becoming sought after by the town's more affluent ladies. Mrs. Peterson, initially skeptical about employing a deaf woman, now proudly displayed Lily's work in the front window, using it to attract customers who might otherwise shop from mail-order catalogs. True to his word, Ian continued their weekly sign language lessons, his progress remarkable for someone who'd never attempted such communication before. By the third lesson, he could manage simple conversations with Lily without Isabella's interpretation, though he still struggled with more complex concepts. "You're a quick study, Sheriff." Isabella commented one evening as they concluded their lesson. "Motivated student," he corrected with a smile that reached his eyes. "And I've had excellent teachers." Their educational dinners had expanded to include occasional Sunday afternoon walks when Ian wasn't on duty, strolls through the growing town where he would point out new construction and share stories of Guthrie's rapid development since the land run. During these outings, Isabella noticed how he naturally placed himself on Lily's side, ensuring she could see his face when he spoke or signed. The consideration seemed so ingrained that Isabella suspected he wasn't even conscious of doing it. It was during one such walk in late September, with autumn painting the surrounding countryside in gold and crimson, that they encountered the first real ugliness since their arrival. They were passing the saloon, keeping to the opposite boardwalk, as befitted respectable ladies, when three cowboys emerged, clearly deep in their cups despite the early hour. "Well now, what have we here?" the tallest of them called out, leering across the street. "Looks like our sheriff's found himself some female company." Ian's posture shifted immediately, his hand moving subtly closer to where Isabella suspected his gun was hidden beneath his jacket. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he replied, his voice casual but carrying a note of warning. "Enjoying our fair town?" The second cowboy spat tobacco juice into the street. "Ain't much of a town yet, but the company seems improved since last we rode through." His gaze fixed on Lily, whose expression remained pleasant but uncomprehending since she couldn't hear the exchange. "The ladies and I were just taking some air," Ian said smoothly. "You boys might want to do the same, sober up a bit." The third man, shorter but broader than his companions, narrowed his eyes. "What's wrong with her? Why is she looking at us like that?" Isabella felt Lily tense beside her, obviously sensing the change in atmosphere even without hearing the words. Isabella subtly signed a brief explanation, keeping her hands low. "She's making those hand signals," the tall cowboy said, his voice turning ugly. "Like them Injuns do." "Miss Harris is deaf," Ian stated firmly. "She communicates through sign language. Now, if you'll excuse us, deaf, huh?" The second cowboy lurched forward, crossing the street with an exaggerated stagger. "Hey, dummy, can you hear me now?" He shouted the last words directly at Lily, who flinched at the aggressive movement even though the sound meant nothing to her. Isabella stepped protectively closer to her sister, but before she could respond, Ian moved with surprising speed, placing himself between the women and the drunken man. "That's enough," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of authority. "You're speaking to a lady, and in my town we treat ladies with respect. All ladies," the cowboy sneered. "Some defective female who can't even hear 'ain't no lady' in my book." What happened next occurred so quickly, Isabella could barely follow it. Ian's hand shot out, gripping the man's shirt front and propelling him backward until he slammed against the boardwalk support post. "Apologize," Ian commanded, his face inches from the cowboys, "or spend the night in my jail for public drunkenness and disturbing the peace. Your choice." The cowboys' companions had frozen, obviously reassessing the situation. The sheriff's reputation was apparently enough to make them reconsider their bravado. "Didn't mean nothing by it," the cowboy muttered, not meeting Ian's gaze. "To the lady," Ian insisted, not releasing his grip. The man's eyes flickered to Lily, who was watching the scene with wide, concerned eyes. "Sorry, miss," he managed. Ian released him with a slight shove. "Now take your friends and clear out. Come back when you can behave civilly." The three cowboys retreated, muttering among themselves but making no further trouble. Ian watched them go, his body still tense with controlled anger. When he turned back to Isabella and Lily, his expression softened immediately. I apologize for that unpleasantness. Are you both all right? Isabella nodded, translating his question for Lily, whose hands moved quickly in response. She says thank you for defending her, Isabella relayed, but she's used to such reactions. Ian's jaw tightened. She shouldn't have to be used to it. The fierceness of his response caught Isabella by surprise. No, she agreed quietly, she shouldn't. They continued their walk, though the earlier light-hearted mood had dissipated. When they reached the boarding house, Ian hesitated before taking his leave. I hope this incident won't discourage your sister, he said. Most folks in Guthrie aren't like those men. Lily has encountered far worse, I'm afraid, Isabella replied. She's stronger than she appears. Ian nodded slowly. I've noticed that about both Harris sisters. His gaze held hers for a moment longer than necessary, something unspoken passing between them. Thank you again, Sheriff, Isabella said finally, breaking the tension. For everything. As they parted ways, Isabella found herself reflecting on Ian's immediate, unquestioning defense of Lily. Most men of her acquaintance would have been embarrassed by the situation, perhaps offering placating words to the cowboys rather than confrontation. Ian's response had been instinctive protect first, worry about social niceties later. That evening, as the sisters prepared for bed, Lily's hands moved in the lamplight. He would have fought for me, she signed. Not many would. He's the sheriff, Isabella responded practically. It's his duty to maintain order. Lily shook her head. It was more than duty. Did you see his face? He was angry, not embarrassed, not inconvenienced angry that they would treat me that way. Isabella couldn't deny the truth in her sister's observation. He's a good man, she conceded. He cares for you, Lily signed. I see how he watches when you're not looking. Lily, and you care for him too, don't deny it. Isabella sighed, sinking onto her bed. Even if that were true, it changes nothing. Our situation is complicated enough without introducing romance. Lily sat beside her, taking her hands to ensure Isabella's full attention. You've put your life on hold for me since we were children. When our parents died, you gave up everything to keep us together. Her fingers squeezed Isabella's. I love you for it, but I won't be the reason you deny yourself happiness. Tears pricked at Isabella's eyes. You're my sister. Your well-being has never been a burden. And now we're both establishing ourselves in this new place. I have work I love, respect for my skills. We have a home, friends beginning to form. Lily's expression turned earnest. Perhaps it's time you allowed yourself to want something beyond security. Isabella brushed away a tear that had escaped. When did my little sister become so wise? Lily's smile turned mischievous. I've always been wise. You were just too busy taking care of me to notice. They laughed together, the tension broken. But that night, Isabella lay awake long after Lily's breathing had deepened into sleep, contemplating her sister's words. For so long, her entire identity had been defined by her role as protector, provider, interpreter. The idea of allowing herself to be vulnerable, to want something for herself alone, was terrifying. Yet each time she closed her eyes, she saw Ian's face, the quiet strength in his expression when he defended Lily, the gentle concentration as he practiced his signs, the warmth in his gaze when it rested on her. Dangerous thoughts, leading down a path she wasn't sure she was brave enough to travel. October brought a crisp chill to the air and increased business to the dress shop, as Guthrie's residents prepared for winter. The town had grown substantially in the months since the sisters' arrival, with new businesses opening weekly and the framework of a proper hotel rising on the corner of the main street. One Tuesday afternoon, as Isabella was finishing a customer's measurements, the shop bell jingled and Ian entered, looking somewhat out of place among the bolts of fabric and dress forms. Several female customers eyed him with interest, but his gaze sought out Isabella immediately. "Sheriff Vance," Mrs. Peterson greeted him. "What brings you to my establishment? Surely not a new suit, you'd want the tailor for that." "Actually, I'm here on official business," he replied, though his eyes still lingered on Isabella. "There's to be a harvest celebration. This Saturday town council approved it this morning. Thought the ladies here might want to know, as I expect there'll be a run on ribbons and such finery." Mrs. Peterson's eyes lit up at the prospect of increased sales. "How thoughtful of you to inform us first, Sheriff. We'll certainly prepare additional stock." Ian nodded, then finally turned his attention fully to the shop owner. "The council also mentioned wanting decorations for the town square, bunting, banners, that sort of thing. Thought your shop might be interested in the commission." "Indeed we would," Mrs. Peterson replied eagerly. "Isabella, come make notes on what the council requires." For the next few minutes, Isabella took detailed instructions about the decorations needed while Lily continued working on a wedding dress embellishment in the corner. When the business was concluded, Ian hesitated before leaving. "There'll be dancing at the celebration," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "Proper dancing with a band brought in from Oklahoma City." His eyes met Isabella's. "I was hoping you and your sister might consider attending, with me." Isabella's heart skipped traitorously. "Both of us?" "Of course." His gaze shifted to where Lily sat, her head bent over her work, unaware of their conversation. "I may not be much of a dancer, but I'd be honored to escort you both." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. He truly meant to include Lily in the invitation, not merely as an obligation but as a genuine companion. "I'll need to discuss it with my sister," Isabella replied, finding her voice oddly unsteady. "But thank you for the invitation." Ian nodded, touching his hat brim. "I'll await your answer." "Good day, ladies." After he'd gone, Mrs. Peterson raised an eyebrow at Isabella. "Well now, seems our sheriff has taken quite an interest in you, Miss Vaughn." Isabella felt her cheeks warm. "He's been kind to both my sister and me since our arrival, nothing more." The older woman snorted softly. "I've known Ian Vance since he took the badge 3 years ago. Never seen him enter a dress shop before today, official business or not." She picked up her scissors with a knowing look. Man could have sent a deputy with that message. That evening, Isabella relayed Ian's invitation to Lily, who responded with predictable enthusiasm. "A dance?" her hands exclaimed. "Of course we must go, you're sure?" Isabella asked, signing as she spoke. "Such events can be challenging." Lily's expression turned determined. "I may not hear the music, but I can feel its rhythm, and I can certainly enjoy the company and the celebration." Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Unless you're looking for reasons to decline. Are you afraid?" "Of course not," Isabella protested. "I just want you to be comfortable." "I'm more concerned with your comfort," Lily sighed. "You haven't attended a social event as anything other than my caretaker since we were girls. Perhaps it's time you remembered how to simply enjoy yourself." Isabella couldn't deny the truth in her sister's words. Their parents had ensured Lily participated in community events, despite her deafness. But since their deaths, Isabella had approached such gatherings primarily as Lily's protector and interpreter. The idea of attending as a woman in her own right, perhaps even allowing herself to be courted, felt almost foreign. "Very well," she agreed finally. "We'll accept the sheriff's invitation." Lily clapped her hands in delight, then signed rapidly. "We'll need to finish our new dresses immediately." "The blue fabric for you, it matches your eyes." Isabella laughed at her sister's enthusiasm. "We're working on decorations for the entire town. When exactly do you propose we make these dresses?" "We'll manage," Lily signed with confidence. "Some things are worth the extra effort." The next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. The shop was busier than ever with women ordering new ribbons and having dresses altered for the celebration. Isabella delivered their acceptance to Ian via a brief note, which he acknowledged with a tip of his hat when they passed on the street the following day. In the evenings, the sisters worked on their own garments, a rich blue dress with subtle embroidery for Isabella, and a forest green creation that complemented Lily's auburn hair. Saturday dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for an outdoor celebration. The town square had been transformed with harvest decorations, including the bunting and banners created by the dress shop. Trestle tables lined one side, laden with food contributed by Guthrie's residents, while a platform had been erected for the band. Already, families were beginning to gather, children running excitedly between displays of produce and homemade goods. Ian arrived at the boarding house promptly at noon, dressed in what Isabella recognized as his Sunday best, a dark suit with a string tie, his badge polished but still prominently displayed on his vest. He'd even trimmed his beard for the occasion, making him look younger and somewhat less forbidding than in his usual sheriff's attire. "Ladies," he greeted them, his eyes widening appreciatively as they descended the stairs. "You both look beautiful." "Thank you," Isabella replied, translating for Lily. "The decorations look wonderful from what we could see from our window." "Your handiwork has been much admired," Ian assured them, offering an arm to each sister as they stepped onto the porch. "I think half the town has commented on the fine stitching." They made their way to the town square, where the celebration was now in full swing. Isabella noticed how Ian subtly guided them through the crowds, positioning himself so that Lily was protected from jostling while still able to see what was happening around her. He greeted townspeople as they passed, introducing the sisters to those they hadn't yet met through the dress shop. Sheriff Vance, called a portly man with an impressive mustache, was beginning to think you wouldn't leave your post long enough to enjoy the festivities. "Mayor Blackwell," Ian returned politely. "May I introduce Miss Isabella Vaughn and Miss Lily Harris, ladies, our esteemed mayor." The mayor beamed at them. "Ah, the talented seamstresses. My wife hasn't stopped talking about the dress embellishments you created for her, Miss Harris." He addressed Lily directly, though his voice rose unnecessarily as he spoke. Isabella started to translate, but to her surprise, Ian's hands were already moving, signing the mayor's greeting to Lily with careful precision. The mayor's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Well, I'll be," he murmured. "Didn't know you had that particular skill, Sheriff." "Recent acquisition," Ian replied, a hint of pride in his voice as Lily smiled in response to his signing. The mayor studied the three of them thoughtfully. "Glad to see our town officials taking such interest in accommodating all our citizens." He winked at Isabella before moving on to greet other arrivals. As the day progressed, Isabella found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. They sampled the abundant food, admired the agricultural displays, and watched children competing in sack races. Ian remained attentive to both sisters, signing what he could for Lily and allowing Isabella to interpret the rest without making her feel like she was working rather than celebrating. When the band began to play in the late afternoon, couples formed squares for a lively country dance. Isabella tensed, uncertain how to navigate this portion of the celebration, but Ian seemed to have anticipated the challenge. "I've been thinking about the dancing," he said, turning to include Lily in the conversation with careful positioning. "Miss Harris, I've observed that you can feel vibrations through the floorboards. Would it help if we stayed near the platform where the band is playing? The rhythm might be more noticeable there." Isabella translated, touched by his thoughtfulness. Lily's face brightened as she nodded enthusiastically. For the next hour, they took turns dancing, Ian with Isabella for one song, then with Lily for the next. When dancing with Lily, he kept one hand firmly at her waist, using subtle pressure to guide her through the steps in time with the music she couldn't hear, but could feel through the wooden platform. Isabella watched from the sidelines, her heart full at the sight of her sister, laughing with uninhibited joy as she danced like any other young woman at the celebration. During a break in the music, as Lily chatted with a young matron who had expressed interest in learning some basic signs, Ian brought Isabella a cup of punch and led her to a quiet corner. "Your sister dances beautifully," he commented. "Better than most who can hear the music." "She's always loved dancing," Isabella replied. "Our father used to hold her feet on top of his boots so she could feel the rhythm through his movements." The memory brought a pang of both sadness and fondness. Ian studied her face. "You miss them very much." It wasn't a question, but Isabella nodded anyway. "Every day, but especially at moments like this when I wish they could see how well Lily is doing despite everything." "They'd be proud of you both," Ian said softly. Building new lives, refusing to be limited by circumstances or others' expectations. Isabella looked up at him, struck by how perfectly he seemed to understand what drove her. "Thank you. For today, for including Lily so naturally. Most men would have seen her as a burden to be tolerated." Ian's expression turned serious. "I meant what I said when we first met. Everyone deserves to be part of the community. Your sister is remarkable. Her deafness doesn't change that." "No," Isabella agreed. "It doesn't, though few see it that way." "Then they're fools," he replied simply. The afternoon light caught in his blue eyes, and Isabella felt that dangerous flutter return to her chest, stronger than before. Standing so close to him, away from the crowd, she became acutely aware of his presence, the clean scent of soap, the slight roughness of his hands, the way he looked at her as if truly seeing her. The band struck up again, a slower tune this time. Ian held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Vaughn?" "What about Lily?" Isabella asked automatically. Ian nodded toward where Lily was still engaged in conversation, teaching the young matron and now several other ladies some basic signs. "I think your sister has made some friends of her own." Seeing Lily so comfortably integrated into a group, Isabella allowed herself to place her hand in Ian's. He led her to the edge of the dancing area, one hand resting lightly at her waist while the other clasped hers. The proper distance remained between them as they began to move in time to the music, but Isabella felt the warmth of his touch through the fabric of her dress, as if no barrier existed at all. "I should warn you," Ian said as they turned. "I learned to dance from a grizzled old cavalry sergeant. He claimed to know the steps, but I suspect he was making most of it up as he went along." Isabella laughed, relaxing into the movement. "You're doing just fine, Sheriff." "Ian," he corrected. "At least when I'm not wearing the badge in an official capacity." "Ian," she repeated softly, the name feeling intimate on her lips. They danced in companionable silence for a moment before he spoke again. "I've been meaning to ask you something, Isabella, if I may be so bold." Her heart quickened at his use of her given name. "Yes." "I know you came to Guthrie for a fresh start, to establish yourselves with the dress shop." His eyes held her steadily as they moved among the other dancers. "I was wondering if you intend to stay permanently." The question surprised her. "We have no plans to leave, if that's what you're asking." "Guthrie has been welcoming and the work is good." "I'm glad to hear it," he replied, a note of relief in his voice. "I've grown accustomed to our sign language lessons. Would hate to lose my teachers just as I'm making progress." There was something in his tone that suggested he meant more than his words conveyed. Isabella felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Is that the only reason you'd miss us?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Ian's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "No," he answered simply. "Not the only reason at all." Before he could elaborate, the dance ended, and they were separated by the crowd forming for the next set. Isabella made her way back to Lily, her mind swirling with possibilities she'd been denying herself for too long. The rest of the celebration passed in a pleasant blur. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit around the square, casting a golden glow over the continuing festivities. Lily eventually tired of the crowd, and the effort of lip-reading so many different people, signaling to Isabella that she was ready to return to the boarding house. Ian escorted them home, carrying a basket of harvest gifts that the mayor's wife had pressed upon them: preserves, fresh bread, and apples from her own tree. At the boarding house steps, he set the basket down and turned to them both. "Thank you for allowing me to accompany you today," he said, signing the words he knew while speaking aloud for Isabella to translate the rest. Lily signed back her thanks, adding that she had enjoyed herself immensely. Then, with a meaningful glance at Isabella, she signed that she was very tired and would go upstairs immediately, giving them a moment of privacy. Before Isabella could protest, Lily had taken the basket and disappeared into the boarding house, leaving her alone with Ian on the darkened porch. "Your sister is about as subtle as a stampeding buffalo," Ian commented with a chuckle. Isabella shook her head, embarrassed by Lily's obvious matchmaking. "I apologize for her enthusiasm." "Don't," Ian replied, taking a step closer. "I've been trying to find the courage to speak with you privately for weeks now." The earnestness in his voice made Isabella's breath catch. "What did you want to say?" In the gentle glow of the porch lamp, Ian's face was a study in determination and vulnerability. "I'm not a man of flowery words, Isabella, never have been. But I need you to know that these past months, getting to know you and Lily, learning to communicate in a new way, it's changed me." Isabella remained silent, afraid to interrupt the flow of his thoughts. "I admire your strength, your dedication to your sister, the way you've built a new life here without compromising who you are." He took a deep breath. "But beyond admiration, I've come to care for you deeply, more than I thought possible after." He trailed off, seeming to reconsider his words. "After what?" Isabella prompted gently. Ian's jaw tightened momentarily. "I was married once, years ago, before I came to Oklahoma Territory. She died in childbirth, along with our son. For a long time after, I didn't think I'd ever want to risk that kind of loss again." Understanding flooded through Isabella. His earlier comment about knowing what it was like to feel isolated, even in a crowd, suddenly made perfect sense. "I'm so sorry, Ian." He nodded acknowledgement. "It was a dark time. Taking the sheriff's position here was part of starting over, much like you and Lily coming to Guthrie." "And now," Isabella asked softly, "now I find myself thinking about possibilities again, a future that includes more than just doing my duty." His blue eyes were intent on hers. "I'm not asking for any promises, Isabella. Just a chance to court you properly, if you're amenable." The directness of his proposal, so like the man himself, touched Isabella deeply. There were 1,000 practical considerations, questions about how such a relationship might work with her responsibilities to Lily, concerns about what the future might hold. But in that moment, looking into Ian's earnest face, Isabella found she didn't want to analyze or plan or protect herself from potential hurt. "I would like that very much," she replied simply. The smile that transformed his features was worth any risk. He took her hand, raising it slowly to his lips in a gesture both old-fashioned and deeply affecting. "Then I'll call on you tomorrow afternoon if that suits." Isabella nodded, suddenly shy despite the momentous conversation they just had. "We'll look forward to it." As Ian took his leave, his steps lighter than when he'd arrived, Isabella watched him disappear into the gathering darkness. A new chapter was beginning, unexpected, potentially complicated, but filled with a promise she hadn't dared hope for since leaving Kansas. Inside, she found Lily waiting in their room, pretending to be absorbed in mending but clearly bursting with curiosity. Her hands flew into motion as soon as Isabella entered. "Well, did he finally declare himself?" Isabella couldn't suppress her smile. "He asked permission to court me." Lily squealed with delight, an uninhibited sound that emerged from her throat despite her inability to hear it. Her hands moved rapidly. "I knew it. The way he looks at you, it was only a matter of time." "What did you say?" "I said yes," Isabella admitted, sinking onto her bed. "Though heaven knows what I'm thinking. Our situation is complicated enough without adding romance to the mix." Lily's expression softened. "Love isn't a complication, sister. It's a blessing." Her hands paused, then added more seriously, "You deserve happiness, Isabella. Don't let fear of what might happen keep you from embracing what's being offered now." As always, Lily's insight cut through Isabella's defenses. She reached out to squeeze her sister's hand. "When did you become so wise about matters of the heart?" Lily's mischievous smile returned. "I observe. People forget I'm watching when they think I can't hear. You see a lot that way." Isabella laughed, the sound releasing tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was grateful for her sister's unwavering support and for the unexpected second chance at happiness that had found her in this frontier town. The weeks that followed took on a dreamlike quality for Isabella. Ian called regularly, sometimes just to walk with the sisters after church, other times to escort Isabella alone while Lily remained at the boarding house with her new friends. The town observed their courtship with approving interest. The respected sheriff and the talented seamstress seemed a natural match in the community's eyes. As October gave way to November, Ian's sign language skills improved dramatically. He could now carry on basic conversations with Lily without Isabella's interpretation, something that delighted Lily and moved Isabella profoundly. She had never before known a man outside her family who would make such an effort. One crisp Sunday afternoon, they walked along the creek that ran behind the town, the trees nearly bare now but beautiful in their stark silhouettes against the clear blue sky. Lily had begged off, claiming a headache, though Isabella suspected she was simply giving them privacy. "Your sister is about as transparent as glass," Ian commented as they strolled, their breath forming small clouds in the chilly air. Isabella laughed. "Subtlety has never been Lily's strong suit." "I like that about her," he replied. "Honesty is underrated." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, eventually reaching a fallen log where they sat to rest. Ian took Isabella's gloved hand in his, studying it thoughtfully. "I've been thinking," he began, "about Christmas. It's only a month away." Isabella nodded. It would be their first Christmas without their parents, a fact that had been weighing on her mind. "I know it might be difficult for you and Lily," Ian continued, seeming to read her thoughts. "First holidays after losing loved ones always are." "We'll manage," Isabella assured him, touched by his concern. "We have each other and we've been welcomed here. It's more than many have." Ian squeezed her hand gently. "I was wondering if you'd consider spending Christmas Day with me, both of you, of course. My house is small but comfortable, and I've been told my roast turkey is passable." The invitation touched Isabella deeply. "You cook," he chuckled. "Don't look so surprised. A man living alone has to feed himself somehow. I picked up a few recipes over the years." "We'd be honored," Isabella replied sincerely. Though Lily will insist on bringing dessert, her apple pie is legendary. I look forward to it, Ian said, his expression softening as he gazed at her. Isabella, these past weeks have been. Well, they've meant more to me than I can properly express. Her heart quickened at the intensity in his voice. They've meant a great deal to me as well. Ian shifted to face her more directly. I don't want to rush you, and I know you have concerns about Lily's future. But I want you to know my intentions are serious. I care deeply for you, and for your sister too. Isabella found herself momentarily speechless. Though they had been courting openly, neither had spoken so directly about their feelings or future since the night of the harvest celebration. Ian, she began, uncertain how to express the tangle of emotions within her. I care for you too, more than I thought possible after all that's happened, but my situation is complicated. Lily depends on me. Lily is a capable, intelligent woman, he countered gently. And I would never ask you to choose between us. Any future I imagine includes both of you. The simple statement broke through the last of Isabella's reservations. Tears pricked at her eyes, not of sadness but of profound relief at being so completely understood. I've been so afraid, she admitted softly. Afraid of allowing myself to want something for myself alone, afraid of what might happen to Lily if I did. Ian lifted his hand to her cheek, the leather of his glove cool against her skin. You don't have to choose, Isabella. And you don't have to carry every burden alone anymore. Overwhelmed by emotion, Isabella leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder. Ian's arms encircled her, strong and secure, as natural as if they'd been embracing for years rather than the first time. I never thought I'd find this, she whispered. Not after everything we've been through. Nor did I, he replied, his voice rough with feeling. But here we are. When she lifted her face to his, the question in his eyes was unmistakable. Isabella nodded slightly, and Ian lowered his head, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that felt both like coming home and embarking on an extraordinary journey. It was gentle at first, almost reverent, then deepened as Isabella responded with the emotions she'd kept carefully contained for so long. When they finally parted, both somewhat breathless, Ian smiled that transformative smile that never failed to warm her from within. Mrs. Daniels will have my hide if I don't have you back by supper, he said regretfully. Isabella laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. She does run a respectable establishment. They walked back toward town hand in hand, discussing Christmas plans and the latest town news. The future still held questions, challenges they would need to navigate together. But for the first time since her parents' death, Isabella allowed herself to hope without reservation. As they approached the boarding house, Ian paused, his expression turning serious once more. There's something else I should tell you, something I've been considering. What is it? Isabella asked, concerned by his sudden gravity. I've been offered a position as U.S. Marshal for the Western District. It would mean more responsibility, better pay, but also more travel. His eyes held hers steadily. I haven't given my answer yet. Wanted to discuss it with you first, since it might affect, well, us. The consideration behind his words consulting her before making such a significant decision moved Isabella deeply. When would you need to start? After the new year if I accept, he studied her face. It's good work, important work, but I won't take it if. If what, Ian? If it means losing what we're building here, he finished simply. Isabella thought carefully before responding. I think you should accept, she said finally. It's an honor to be chosen, and you're well suited to the position. You're not concerned about the travel. I might be gone for weeks at a time. I've managed on my own before, Isabella reminded him with a small smile. And Guthrie would still be your base, wouldn't it? Ian nodded. It would. I'd maintain my home here. "Then I see no reason to decline such an opportunity," she said firmly. "Though I must admit, I would miss you terribly while you were away." The admission brought a warmth to Ian's eyes that made Isabella's heart skip. "Would you now?" "Don't let it go to your head, Sheriff," she teased, relieved to see his serious expression lighten. He laughed, raising her hand to his lips once more before taking his leave. "I'll consider the position carefully and let you know my decision soon." As Isabella watched him stride away, she marveled at how completely her life had changed in just a few months. From desperate refugees seeking any safe harbor to women with promising careers, a community that valued them, and now for Isabella at least the possibility of a love she had thought forever beyond her reach. Lily was waiting when she entered their room, her expressive face alive with curiosity. "Well," she signed eagerly, "you look different. What happened?" Isabella felt a blush rise to her cheeks as she signed back, "He kissed me." Lily clapped her hands in delight. "Finally, was it wonderful? It looked wonderful when I saw other couples." "It was." "Perfect," Isabella admitted, unable to suppress her smile. "He's invited us for Christmas dinner at his house." "Of course we'll go," Lily signed decisively. "I'll make my apple pie." She studied Isabella's face more carefully. "There's something else. What aren't you telling me?" Isabella hesitated, then signed. "He's been offered a position as U.S. Marshal. It would mean more travel but better pay and more responsibility." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "He'd be good at that. Will he take it?" "He wanted to discuss it with me first," Isabella replied, still touched by the consideration. "I told him he should accept. Because it's what he deserves, or because you're afraid of holding him back?" Lily's perceptive question cut right to Isabella's hidden concerns. "Both, perhaps," she admitted. "But mainly because it's an honor he's earned through his service. I wouldn't want him to decline on my account." Lily's hands moved emphatically. "If he loves you and I believe he does, he'll find a way to balance duty and happiness." "But you must be honest about your own needs too, Isabella." Isabella nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in her sister's counsel. "When did you become so insightful about love?" Lily's smile turned wistful. "I may not have experienced it personally, but I've observed it all my life. Between our parents, and now between you and Ian." Isabella embraced her sister, holding her close for a long moment. When they separated, she signed with firm determination. "Your time will come too, Lily. There's someone who will see you as clearly as Ian sees me." Lily's hands responded with characteristic optimism. "I know. And when he appears, I'll recognize him immediately because he'll learn to speak with his hands, just like Ian did for you." The weeks leading up to Christmas passed in a flurry of activity. The dress shop was busier than ever with holiday orders, and Isabella and Lily worked long hours to meet the demand. Ian accepted the marshal position, which would begin officially on January 10th. The news was received with mixed reactions in Guthrie pride that one of their own had been recognized with such an appointment, but concern about losing their effective sheriff. "They'll find someone suitable to replace me," Ian assured Isabella as they discussed the town's response. "Deputy Miller has shown promise. He might be ready for the responsibility." Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, with a dusting of snow that had fallen overnight, transforming Guthrie into a picture postcard frontier town. Lily woke early, excited as a child as she and Isabella exchanged simple gifts: new gloves for Lily, a silk scarf for Isabella, practical items they had both needed but would not have purchased for themselves. At noon, Ian arrived with his buggy to transport them to his home on the outskirts of town. Isabella had never visited his house before, and she found herself both curious and slightly nervous as they approached the modest but well-maintained structure. It stood on a small rise, with a view of the surrounding countryside and a sturdy barn beside it. "It's not much," Ian said as he helped them down from the buggy, "but it's home." "It's lovely," Isabella replied sincerely. Inside, the house was simple but comfortable, with solid furniture and a few personal touches that spoke of Ian's character books on a shelf. A well-worn quilt that Isabella guessed might have belonged to his mother. A gun rack with several rifles carefully maintained. A fire blazed cheerfully in the stone fireplace, warming the main room. Ian had clearly gone to considerable effort for their visit. The table was set with his best dishes, and the scent of roasting turkey filled the house. A small pine tree stood in one corner, decorated with simple ornaments. "I'm not much for decorating," he admitted, following her gaze to the tree, "but I thought it wouldn't feel like Christmas without one." "It's perfect," Isabella assured him, touched by the gesture. Lily set her pie on the kitchen table, signing her approval of the house. Ian responded in sign, his movements now nearly as fluent as his speech. "Welcome to my home. I'm honored to have you both here." The day passed in comfortable domesticity. The meal was delicious. Ian had indeed mastered the art of roasting turkey, and the conversation flowed easily among the three of them. As dusk fell, they moved to the sitting area near the fireplace, where Ian surprised them by producing a small parcel for each sister. "It isn't much," he said, suddenly seeming almost shy, "but I wanted you to have something to remember this day." Lily opened hers first, gasping in delight as she unwrapped a beautiful leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover. "For your designs," Ian signed. "I noticed you often sketch your embroidery patterns on scraps of paper." Lily embraced him impulsively, clearly moved by the thoughtful gift. Then she stepped back, signing rapidly. "I'll let you two exchange your gifts privately. I want to look at the barn. I've always loved how they smell." Before Isabella could protest, Lily had donned her coat and slipped outside, her intentions transparent. Ian chuckled as the door closed behind her. Subtle as always. Isabella smiled, though her heart was suddenly racing. "She means well." "She does," he agreed, then handed Isabella the second package. "Merry Christmas, Isabella." The parcel was small, wrapped in plain brown paper tied with red string. Isabella unwrapped it carefully to find a velvet box. Her breath caught as she opened it to reveal a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. "It opens," Ian said softly. With trembling fingers, Isabella pressed the tiny catch. Inside the locket were two miniature portraits, one of Lily, the other of Isabella's parents, carefully copied from the daguerreotype she kept on their dresser. "Ian," she whispered, tears filling her eyes, "how did you, Mrs. Daniels let me borrow the picture while you were at work," he explained. "I sent it to Oklahoma City with a request for the miniatures. I wanted you to be able to carry them with you always." Overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness behind the gift, Isabella could only shake her head in wonder. "It's the most beautiful present I've ever received." Ian took the locket from her hands, gently fastening it around her neck. As he did so, his fingers brushed against her skin, sending a shiver of awareness through her. "There's something else I wanted to give you today," he said, his voice low and serious as he stepped back to face her. "Something that can't be wrapped or placed in a box." Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs as Ian took her hands in his. "I love you, Isabella Vaughn," he said simply. "I think I've loved you since that first day when you stood in the street, fierce as a mama bear protecting her cub, translating for your sister without a hint of apology or shame." A single tear escaped, trailing down Isabella's cheek as the words she'd both hoped for and feared registered fully. "I know it hasn't been long," Ian continued, "and I know your first commitment will always be to Lily as it should be, but I want you to know that my heart is yours completely if you'll have it." "Ian," Isabella managed through the emotion tightening her throat. "I love you too. So much that it terrifies me sometimes." His face transformed with joy at her words. "Then we're both terrified together," he said with a soft laugh. "Makes it less frightening somehow." Their kiss was deeper than the first they'd shared, filled with the promise of their declared love. Isabella allowed herself to be drawn into his embrace, marveling at how right it felt to be held by him, how perfectly they fit together. When they finally parted, Ian kept his arms around her, his expression turning serious once more. "I had planned to wait," he said, "to give you more time. But today, being here with you and Lily, seeing you in my home, I can't imagine my life without you in it." Isabella's breath caught as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer," Ian said quickly. "I understand you need to consider Lily, to be sure this is right for both of you, but I want you to know my intentions." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small diamond that caught the firelight. "I want to build a life with you, Isabella, as your husband, if you'll have me." For a moment, Isabella couldn't speak. The hope and vulnerability in Ian's eyes moved her beyond words. This was what she had never allowed herself to dream of: a man who loved her completely, who understood her responsibilities and embraced them as his own. "Yes," she whispered finally, her voice strengthening as she repeated, "Yes, Ian, I will marry you." His face lit with such joy that Isabella felt her heart might burst with answering happiness. Ian slipped the ring onto her finger, then lifted her hand to his lips. "I promise you won't regret it," he said fervently. "I'll spend my life making you happy, both of you." As if on cue, the door opened and Lily stepped back inside, stamping snow from her boots. She took one look at their faces and the ring now adorning Isabella's hand, and her expression bloomed with delight. "Finally," she signed emphatically, hurrying forward to embrace them both. Ian signed to her directly, his movements confident now after months of practice. "I've asked your sister to marry me and she said yes. I hope you'll give us your blessing." Lily's hands flew in excited response. "Of course. I've been waiting for this since summer." They laughed together, the three of them forming a circle of shared joy in the warm, firelit room. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, blanketing the prairie in pristine white, but within the small house, Isabella had never felt warmer or more secure. Later, as they prepared to return to town before the snowfall made travel difficult, Lily tactfully busied herself in the kitchen, allowing Isabella and Ian a moment alone. "Are you sure about this?" Isabella asked, her practical nature reasserting itself. "Your new position will demand much of your time. Adding a wife and sister-in-law to your responsibilities." Ian silenced her with a gentle finger to her lips. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life," he said firmly. "Yes, there will be challenges. Yes, my duties will take me away at times, but having you and Lily to come home to, that's not a burden, Isabella. It's a blessing I never thought I'd have again." His sincerity was unmistakable. Isabella leaned into his embrace, allowing herself to fully accept the gift being offered: not just love, but partnership, understanding, a shared future with a man who saw her completely and loved her exactly as she was. "When?" she asked softly. "When should we marry?" Ian considered for a moment. "I start the new position on January 10th. Would 2 weeks be enough time for preparations? January 6th, perhaps?" Isabella nodded, practical considerations already filling her mind. "A small ceremony at the church, just close friends." "Whatever you want," Ian agreed, kissing her forehead. "Though I suspect the entire town will find a way to participate, whether invited or not. You've both become quite beloved in Guthrie." The knowledge warmed Isabella. From desperate refugees to respected members of the community in just a few months, it seemed almost miraculous. "I'll speak to Reverend Thomas tomorrow," Ian continued, "and we'll need to decide where to live. This house is yours now too, of course, but it might be small for 3 adults." "It's perfect," Isabella assured him. "Lily and I don't require much space. And being outside town, a little way might be peaceful after the bustle of the boarding house." As they prepared the buggy for the journey back to town, Isabella found her gaze returning repeatedly to the small house on the rise soon to be her home, their home. The thought filled her with a sense of rightness, of completion. This was what they had journeyed so far to find, not just work or shelter, but belonging. A place where Lily's deafness was accepted without question, where Isabella could be both sister and woman in her own right, where the past was honored but did not dictate the future. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. News of their engagement spread quickly through Guthrie, met with universal approval. Mrs. Peterson insisted on closing the shop for the wedding day, declaring it a civic holiday since the sheriff and the town's finest seamstresses were uniting. Mrs. Daniels helped Isabella and Lily move their belongings to Ian's house, now their house, in stages, so they would be fully settled after the ceremony. Isabella found unexpected joy in these preparations. After years of merely surviving, of focusing on necessities, the simple act of planning for happiness felt almost revolutionary. She created a special dress for the occasion, not white, which seemed inappropriate for a mature bride, but a soft blue silk with Lily's exquisite embroidery adorning the bodice. Ian had his marshal's uniform fitted by the town tailor, insisting that no other attire would do for such an important day. January 6th dawned clear and cold, the prairie landscape gleaming white under a brilliant blue sky. Isabella woke early in her room at the boarding house, where she and Lily had spent their final night as unmarried women. Lily was already awake, her hands moving excitedly as she helped Isabella dress and arrange her hair. "Are you nervous?" Lily signed as she secured the last hairpin. Isabella considered the question honestly. "Not about marrying Ian," she replied. "Only about managing everything: his new position, our work, making a proper home." Lily's expression softened. "You've managed far more difficult things, and now you don't have to do it alone." The simple truth in her sister's words steadied Isabella. She clasped Lily's hands in hers. "I couldn't have asked for a better sister or friend. Thank you for encouraging me to take this chance." "You deserve happiness," Lily signed firmly. "Ian is a good man who loves you completely. What more could a sister wish for you?" At the appointed hour, they made their way to the small church, now filled with what seemed like half the town, despite their intentions for a modest ceremony. Isabella hesitated at the entrance, suddenly overwhelmed by the significance of the moment. Then she caught sight of Ian standing at the altar, tall and proud in his marshal's uniform, his face lighting with joy as he saw her. All hesitation vanished. With Lily at her side, Isabella walked down the aisle toward her future, each step feeling more right than the last. When she reached Ian and placed her hand in his, the sense of homecoming was so profound that tears threatened. "You're beautiful," Ian whispered, his voice rough with emotion. The ceremony itself was simple and moving. Reverend Thomas spoke of commitment, partnership, and building a life founded on mutual respect and love. When it came time for the vows, Ian surprised everyone by signing his promises. As he spoke them aloud, a gesture that brought fresh tears to Isabella's eyes and caused Lily to beam with pride. "I, Ian Vance, take thee, Isabella Vaughn, to be my lawfully wedded wife, To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part. His hands moved confidently through the signs they had practiced together over the past months, ensuring that Lily could share fully in this most important moment. When Isabella spoke her own vows, she too signed the words, honoring the language that had become a bridge between their worlds. After the exchange of rings and the pronouncement that they were husband and wife, Ian kissed her with a tenderness that belied the strength in his tall frame. The church erupted in applause and cheers, the sound washing over them like a blessing. The celebration afterward, held at the newly completed hotel's dining room, was more elaborate than they had planned, the town having decided this union deserved proper recognition. Mayor Blackwell made a speech praising Ian's service and welcoming Isabella and Lily, officially, to Guthrie's family. Mrs. Peterson wept openly, declaring she'd never seen finer needlework than on Isabella's wedding dress. Even the cowboys from the surrounding ranches had come to town for the occasion, behaving with unusual decorum out of respect for the new marshal. Throughout it all, Isabella marveled at the community they had found, these once strangers who had become neighbors, employers, friends. And at the center of it all stood Ian, her husband, his presence a steadying force amid the happy chaos. Later, after the last guests had departed and Lily had been escorted to the boarding house for one final night, she would join them at the house the following day, giving the newlyweds their wedding night alone. Ian and Isabella rode in comfortable silence to their home on the rise. Snow crunched beneath the buggy wheels, the only sound in the winter stillness. Stars blazed overhead in the clear night sky, and Isabella felt a sense of peace descend upon her that she had not known since childhood. When they reached the house, Ian helped her down from the buggy, then surprised her by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vance," he said softly as he set her down in the warm interior, the fire already laid and burning in the hearth. "It sounds strange," Isabella admitted with a smile, "but wonderful." "It sounds right to me," Ian replied, drawing her into his arms, "like it was always meant to be." As his lips found hers in a kiss that held the promise of their wedding night and all the nights to come, Isabella knew he was right. Despite the unlikely circumstances of their meeting, despite the challenges they had overcome and those that still awaited them, this was exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of a man who had crossed the boundaries of silence to build a bridge to her sister's world, and in doing so, had found his way to her heart. 4 years later, Isabella stood on the porch of their expanded house, watching as Ian taught their 3-year-old son, Thomas, to sign. The boy's small hands moved with the natural dexterity of youth as he copied his father's gestures, both of them laughing when Thomas accidentally invented a sign of his own. Lily sat nearby, her skilled fingers working on an elaborate christening gown for the newest member of the family, Isabella and Ian's daughter, barely 2 months old, sleeping peacefully in her cradle beside her aunt. In the years since the wedding, Lily had established herself as Guthrie's premier seamstress, taking over management of the shop when Mrs. Peterson retired. Her deafness, once viewed as a limitation, was now considered irrelevant by the townspeople who valued her extraordinary talent and gentle spirit. Ian's position as U.S. Marshal had indeed required travel, sometimes for weeks at a time, but he always returned to them with the same joy and devotion he had shown from the beginning. The house had been expanded to include a separate suite for Lily, giving her independence while keeping her within the family circle. It was an arrangement that satisfied everyone. Lily maintained her dignity as an adult woman with her own career, while remaining an integral part of the family she loved. Isabella's hand rested on her still flat stomach, where a third child had just begun to make its presence known. She hadn't told Ian yet, wanting to be certain before sharing the news. His joy at each pregnancy had been a wonder to behold this man, who had lost his first wife and child embracing fatherhood with a fearless love that humbled her. As if sensing her thoughts, Ian looked up, his smile as transformative as the day she had first seen it. He signed to Thomas, then rose to join her on the porch, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Vance," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Isabella leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid strength that had been her anchor through the challenges and joys of their years together. "I was thinking about the day we met," she replied honestly. "How desperate I felt, how uncertain of our future." Ian nodded, his gaze taking in the peaceful scene before them, their son playing in the yard, Lily contentedly working, the baby sleeping safely nearby. "Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." "Indeed it does," Isabella agreed, turning in his arms to face him fully. "And I have another surprise for you, Marshal Vance." His eyebrows rose questioningly. "Do you now?" Taking his hand, Isabella placed it gently over her stomach, watching as understanding dawned in his expressive blue eyes. "Isabella," he breathed, wonder filling his face. "Are you certain?" She nodded, joy bubbling up within her at his reaction. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday. We'll have a new edition by winter." Ian gathered her close, his embrace gentle despite his obvious excitement. "I am the most fortunate man in the Oklahoma Territory," he declared fervently. "No, in all the United States." Isabella laughed, happiness spilling over in the sound. "And I the most fortunate woman to have found a man who crossed the barriers of silence to reach my sister's world, and in doing so, found his way into my heart." Ian's hands moved in the sign for "I love you," the gesture that had become as natural to him as speaking, a bridge between worlds that had once seemed impossibly separated. As Isabella returned the sign, she thought of that desperate day years ago when she had arrived in Guthrie with nothing but hope and determination. "I'm deaf. Can you write it down?" Lily had asked the tall sheriff with her slate and chalk. Instead, he had learned to speak with his hands, changing all their lives immeasurably in the process. Some might call it chance or coincidence. Isabella reflected as she watched her family, this beautiful, complicated, perfect family they had built together. But in her heart, she knew it was something more profound. The recognition of kindred spirits finding each other across barriers of circumstance and silence, creating together the language of love that needed no words at all.